that experience is helpful. Would you mind telling me about September 11th?
Well, yeah, no, I don't mind.
Okay.
It took me about that was a long time ago now, but it took me about 9 years to process it. So
Yeah.
my attitude toward it is a lot different than it was the first couple of years.
Yeah.
But I wrote it up on a couple of pages after about 1 year, things that I remembered, and then I read it out loud and got a lot off my chest emotionally. But basically, I had just finished the project that I'd been working on for 2 years, which was to bring joint training to all the reserve and guard officers in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard. And it was a big project.
Wow.
Needed a lot of signatures from a lot of generals, a lot of admirals, a lot of their staff. And I actually was just standing up to take it across the Pentagon to put some money into it, to Supply Services Washington, and I was a colonel, I was a full bird colonel, and the Army Lieutenant Colonel, a ranger next to me, Steve Jones, he said, "Sir, something's just happened in New York. We better turn on the television." So we went into the kind of a common area we had. We were in the news section that got hit by the plane. That's where we were the first joint staff in the news section.
Wow.
And so he said, so we turned on the tube, and in the office there, and one of our secretaries, Ida, was with us. There was just the three of us, because there was about 20 people in the section, but they were all gone in different places. And we watched the second plane fly into the second building, and then saw the delay and the cloud of burning fuel come out the other side. And so I said to the two of them, I said, "Well, I better take my package across the Pentagon. We're going to be doing something different here in a very short time." So I called my wife. She was in Foggy Bottom. I walked to work every day, 3.5 miles across out of Washington to the Pentagon. And I called her and I said, I said, "Stay away from the World Bank. We just live right by the World Bank." I said, "Somebody's hitting financial targets. Don't go near that place." So then I took my packet across the interior courtyard, clear to the other side, and went in the building. The Pentagon's just all cement. It's like being inside a big cement pillbox. Went downstairs in the basement, and this blonde was there, a blonde woman, and she took my package, and we did all the signatures. And I said, "Have you got your TV on?" She said, "No," and I said, "You better turn it on." So she went in and turned it on, and so then I went up a back stairwell to the second deck, and because there's a coffee shop up there, and I walked around the A-ring. The A-ring is the inside ring around the courtyard. The E-ring is the outside.
Okay.
And so I was in the A-ring, and I went to the coffee shop, and I went in there. There was nobody in the coffee shop, and my friend Titi, she's a woman from the West Indies, real nice. And I said, "There's no line, you know." So I got myself a cup of coffee, and then she thought it was pretty strange too. There's no people. So then walked out into the A-ring and started walking around to the new section, and there was a new escalator. And I got on the escalator on the A-ring, second deck, and started going down to the B-ring on the first deck. My office was in the B-ring. And as I got to the very bottom, I looked at the top of my coffee pot, my coffee cup. It was an angular Starbucks coffee cup, and it looked like the Pentagon. And I looked at it and I thought, "Oh my God, they're going to hit us," because I realized right away that it would be so easy to see us from the air. To an untrained eye, so easy to see the building shape.
Right.
And so a minute, 5 seconds after that, I stepped off the escalator, and then they hit us. And it knocked me off my feet. I stayed on my feet, but it knocked me off balance. In the hallway in front of me, corridor 4, the corridors go out like spokes. And I was on the inside end of corridor 4, and the plane hit on the outside end of corridor 4, and it came right toward me. And so as I was going down that escalator, that plane was coming down, clipping light posts on the interstate and coming right in on the deck.
Oh my gosh.
And he came in on the first deck just as I was on the first deck, and he took out the second deck. Came in under the third deck. Just blew everything up. But anyhow, 2 men were in front of me. They got blown through a window in front of me. They were screaming. And they were saying, "Get the blankety blank out of the building." And I saw the courtyard, the hallway behind them just turn black. And stuff was flying around, and I got my balance. It felt like really strong people had slammed every door in the building at the same time.
Interesting.
My ears popped. But it sounded like that if you heard somebody slam a door as hard as they could, but everybody slams all their doors, 1,000 doors. That's what it sounded like. And so I was the only person out there. Those two guys had gone out into the courtyard behind me on the first deck. And my boss stuck he was back in the office. He was a KC-135 tanker pilot, Air Force colonel. He stuck his head out and he says, "What the blankety blank was that?" And I said, "I think we've just been bombed." Then he said, "What do we do next?" Because they didn't know I was out in the hallway. And I said, I remembered that fuel burst go through the World Trade Center.
Sure.
And I thought, oh man, I bet there's going to be fuel coming down the hallway. So I said, "Get up against the wall, let's wait for a secondary." So we all stood up against the wall of the B ring. And some Air Force guys came out of the office I was standing next to, and they had stripes all over the place. There's a lot of rank in the Pentagon. But anyhow, and then we could hear this boom. We could hear the plane explode right behind the wall. And then this Air Force sergeant, he says, "There it is." And then we all started going out into the interior courtyard. And I went down to my office and I called my wife, Kathy, and I said, "We've just been hit." And she's 3.5 miles away on the 11th floor of a building in Foggy Bottom by the State Department. She said I could feel it. She could feel the vibration. And so I said, "We're going to try to get out of the building." But what had happened was we went out into the courtyard, and there was about 200 of us that were inside. We were blocked from going out on our escape route because a plane had hit where we would normally go. And so it was real quiet. You could hear the building burning, and people were coming out of the windows above us, broken arms and cut and burned and all that. And those are the ones that were moving around. And so we gathered down there, and nobody panicked or anything. I heard somebody cry, and then somebody put his arm around her. It was understandable, and it was real quiet. You could just hear things burning. And so then we tried to get out the other side through a tunnel, and I was in the front of that. We're walking down the tunnel and got up to the end, and it was barred, and there was no way out. So we had to turn around, go back into the interior courtyard, about 200 of us, and tried a different route. We went out that past the Di Lorenzo Medical Clinic into North Parking, and it ducks down and goes up, and you can't see out the end of the tunnel. But as we were going down, whoever was up in front of the group yelled, "There's a bomb out here." And so the group real quietly turned around, walked back into the interior courtyard again. And then a sergeant, I had my section get up right against the wall because I had been out in the hallway when that first thing hit, and I didn't want to be there if a bomb went off. So then nothing happened. Then a sergeant came and said, "It's all clear." Well, everybody had gone into the interior courtyard, so I went back. We went back with them so we could stay together, keep our section together. That was the other thing. When we went into the Di Lorenzo Medical Clinic, all these docs, when their scrubs were running past us to go out into the courtyard to where the plane had hit. And they're coming at us, and we're going out, and they're going by us. I had my uniform was dirty and all that, and it was really something to see the looks on their face, because they're on the other side of the building. They didn't feel very much, but when they came out and they saw the destruction from the inside, and they were looking up at this plume of smoke over our shoulder, and they were horrified. And then they ran toward the thing to find out who was injured. They were just getting right with it. So we stayed in our sections, went out like we were told to, went out into the south parking. When I got out, I was one of the last people out, I'm sure. This newspaper reporter ran up, and he was sweating, really upset, and he goes, he wanted me to tell him what had happened, and I said, "There's the general right over there, go ask him." Which is probably why there's not much news about it ever been talked about, because you just don't talk like that when you're in the military. And so after a while they got their heads together and they told us to go home, reestablish communication with our section chief. And then, so I started going home, and the only person that day that I saw that knew what was going on was a woman. She was in front of me. You'd walk by all these piles of stuff that people took out of their cars in the parking lot. The whole city was jammed around us in a big traffic jam, and no ambulances were coming or going. So people were taking stuff out of their trunks and their SUVs and putting bodies in there to get them out of there to get to the hospital.
Oh my God.
And then there was casualty collection stations. I was walking by then. There was an equal number of men and women were killed that day. People don't know that, but it's true. And I remember some women, they're just totally shocked, hurt. But anyhow, so I'm going up the river, and people are along the river calling their units on their cell phones in uniform, and this woman in a long ponytail with an FBI jacket on. She had an earwig in, and she starts yelling to all of us, "Get down into the tree line, there's another plane inbound in 5 minutes." And I looked at the 9/11 Commission report, and I followed it, because I know wherever I was at the time, by minute, by second almost.
Yeah.
And about when she was telling us that is when that fourth plane was augering in Pennsylvania. So,
oh my gosh.
But anyhow, I've always thought that if they did the 1-2 like Bin Laden was known to do,
right,
they would have got an awful lot of people exposed in that parking lot. There was 20 or 25,000 people out there.
Sure.
So anyhow, instead of in the building, where you were kind of protected.
Right.
So anyhow, I went home. Memorial Bridge was closed. 3 special forces officers were coming across saying they can't cross here, this closed. So I go up to the Roosevelt Bridge, and I had to hand climb up onto that because it doesn't have a walkway up onto it. And I went out in the middle of the bridge, and I stopped, and the whole city of Washington was evacuating past me. They were walking about 3 miles an hour, talking on their cell phones. People walking, right, pushing their bikes, and it was real deliberate, and it felt like I was in War and Peace. I mean, the whole world's attention had moved to the World Trade Center. But what I was seeing was the capital of our country was evacuating, and everybody was a refugee. That's what I saw.
Yeah.
And I was the only guy going the other way. And,
oh my gosh.
And so I stopped in the middle of the bridge, and I looked down the river. It was a beautiful day. And you could see the Lincoln Memorial and the Jefferson Memorial and the Washington Memorial. The Kennedy Center was right here by my shoulder. Iwo Jima Monument, all the headstones for the Arlington Cemetery. And this twin-tailed fighter, I think it was from North Dakota Air Guard, was taken off from Reagan Airport. He refueled. He had a full load ordnance. He had all his rockets, bombs. He had the most ornery-looking thing you ever saw. And he came up like this, and he rolled over the top of where my office had been, so he could look down into the courtyard. And because I'm sure that's what he wanted to see. That's what he was doing. But I remember thinking that if they ever made a movie of that day, they should put a camera right where I was, so they could see what was really going on. It was really stupendous. It was like being in a big epic movie. And but again, by the time I got home, the whole World Trade Center thing was collapsing. My wife said, "Take a shower, and get into bed," which I did, and I did. And I was horrified at what happened to those people. But it was just terrible. But that, the fact that we almost lost our entire capital with all the built environment and heritage and all that has never been lost on me. I've always felt that if that had been a nuke, it didn't make any difference if I had been killed. I mean, we all got to go sometime. But losing all that accomplishment, that's unacceptable.
Yeah.
We've got to figure out a way to keep that from happening.
Yeah, it's a beautiful city and just so well planned.
And you think about all the Thomas Jefferson, Robert E. Lee, and all that stuff, Abraham Lincoln, all that would be gone. And the way people think about, from one generation to the next, if it's not there, they don't know about it.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Wow. Wow, that's quite the